Yes, it has happened again. Grace Packer was a child, with her whole life ahead of her. At an age when most kids are getting ready to enter high school, Grace Packer was entering the morgue. That she died was the least of the perversions surrounding her early demise. It was how she died, and who took her life, that makes this beyond an abomination. Grace Packer would be yet another sad example of why there's no such thing as innocence when it comes to white-on-white crime. Buck County, Pennsylvania, January 9th, 2016. Remember when I told you in my video on black jury nullification that white people account for 83% of murders in non-metropolitan counties? You ever wonder why it is that white people love living out in the sticks, out in the middle of nowhere, away from everyone else? Well, if you know that so many of these white killings happen out in the boondocks, you can easily see why they prefer to be there, because no one can see what they're up to. Jacob Sullivan and his so-called girlfriend, Sara Packer, adopted a little girl named Grace in 2004. But they didn't do it out of altruism or affection. They did it because she was the final piece in a satanic yet characteristically white perverted fantasy that they wanted to carry out. Sara Packer, it should be noted, was a child welfare worker, and yes, that is a beard you see her with. Yet again, those Neanderthal genes expressed themselves very strongly with these two. You ever wonder what was going on in those caves in Europe thousands of years ago? Well, you're a sick freak if you do, but on the off chance you ever did, this should give you some idea. Bucks County District Attorney Matthew Weintraub said the teen's brutal killing was the result of a months-long plan, a rape-murder fantasy shared by her adoptive mother and her boyfriend. Sullivan and Packer drove Grace to a house that they had rented in Quakertown, Pennsylvania. Sullivan struck Grace several times in the face, splitting her lip. Then he and Packer took the teen to the attic on the 3rd floor. There, Jacob Sullivan raped Grace while Sara Packer watched for her own sick amusement. At some point, Packer left to go get some medicine to sedate Grace. Sullivan told investigators that records of Packer's debit card purchases revealed that Sara Packer was the one who went to buy diphenhydramine tablets and Tylenol capsules at a local Target store on June 8th, the same day that Grace was believed to have been raped and drugged. The two fiends later tied and gagged the teenager and left her in a cedar closet, believing that she would eventually die from the effects of the assault, the drugs, and the excessive heat in the attic. At about 3 a.m. the next morning, more than 12 hours later, they checked on Grace and found that she was still alive and conscious. That's when Jacob Sullivan strangled her to death, admitting later to investigators that it was more physical and took much longer than he expected. Prosecutors said that the two packed the girl's remains in cat litter to mask the odor. For the next 3 months, Grace Packer's corpse would remain in that attic. After they murdered Grace, Sara Packer continued to cash the Social Security checks being sent in her dead foster daughter's name. On July 11th, a few days after the girl is believed to have been murdered, Sara Packer told police that Grace had stolen $300 from her and had run away from home, according to an affidavit. Sara Packer claimed that they had had a fight the night of July 8th because she didn't allow the teenager to go to a friend's house. Grace was gone when she checked on her the following morning, Packer told police, adding that her daughter had been gone before for days at a time, so they didn't think too much of her disappearance. Police said Sara Packer gave them a fake note that she said was left behind by Grace when she allegedly ran away. The typed letter was addressed to the family and discussed Grace being sorry for having been a, quote, burden, and said she left because of that. Police said that the letter had no written signature, and they determined that the language and content was inconsistent with having been written by a 14-year-old girl with the academic and social level of Grace Parker. But investigators found inconsistencies in Packer's statements as well. For instance, in September, Packer told a detective investigating the missing persons report that she had notified relatives about her foster daughter's disappearance, but a North Carolina relative who was Grace's caretaker when she stayed there in 2015 said she didn't know the teen was even missing. Other family members told investigators that they weren't told about Grace's disappearance until later as well. Investigators also noticed oddities in Sara Packer's behavior. In the months after Packer filed a missing persons report, detectives were largely unable to get a hold of her. A frequent Facebook user with a habit of posting about insignificant incidents, such as having a headache, Packer never once posted anything about her daughter's disappearance, according to investigators. After detectives visited the Quakertown home in mid-October for a follow-up investigation, Packer and Sullivan became concerned that investigators would discover Grace's body, which was still in the attic. They had dismembered Grace Packer's corpse in a bathtub and drove out to a remote area where they dumped her remains. Later that month, Pennsylvania State Police troopers responded to a call about human remains found in rural Bear Creek Township in Luzerne County. This is about 70 miles from Sara Packer and Jacob Sullivan's home. Grace Packer was identified from dental records. After searching the house, detectives found a receipt for a bow saw and 2 blades believed to have been used to dismember Grace's body. By then, Sullivan and Packer had fled. Say, why is it whenever white people kill, they can't just shoot someone? They have to skin them, gouge out their eyes, suffocate them for days, rape their corpse, eat their intestines, etc. You ever wonder why they seem to enjoy doing that so much? Just asking. On December 30th, authorities said Packer and Sullivan tried to commit suicide by overdosing on pills. Police said they believed that the two had agreed to kill themselves. At that time, they had moved to an apartment in a neighboring town. A woman who had been living with the couple called 911. Police also said they found a suicide note in which Jacob Sullivan appears to try to explain his innocence to his other children. Like all white thugs, he took absolutely no responsibility for his actions. Fortunately, the would-be suicide attempt failed. And about a week later, Sullivan confessed in detail to hospital staff about the teenager's death, according to affidavits. Sullivan told hospital employees and investigators that he and Packer began plotting the teen's murder in fall 2015 and finally carried it out on July 8, 2016. Sullivan was arrested on Saturday, and Packer was arrested about 3 hours later, according to the district attorney's office. The two were arraigned separately on Sunday. A district judge denied them bail. And this is not the first time Sara Packer has been involved in something like this. Newspaper reports say that Sara Packer's ex-husband, David Warren Packer, was charged by police in Allentown in 2 separate child sex abuse cases. On September 23, 2010, David Packer was charged with indecent assault of a victim under age 13 from a 2006 incident. On November 24, 2010, he was charged by Allentown police in a separate filing of statutory sexual assault, involuntary deviant sexual intercourse of someone under age 16, and corruption of minors from a 2008 incident. But he's white, so you can probably guess what happened next. Those charges all got knocked down to mere indecent assault and statutory sexual assault in both cases, and he was sentenced to a mere 6 months to 5 years in prison and required to register as a sexually violent predator. So, either this cave beast, Sara Packer, just happens to repeatedly accidentally wind up in relationships with demonic degenerates, or she seeks them out. And in the Caucasian community, you'll have no problem finding such creatures very easily. By the way, at the time Sara Packer worked as an adoption supervisor. She was mysteriously suspended from her job in 2010, about the time that David Packer was being arrested and indicted. Authorities still don't know, or rather aren't saying why she was suspended, and the Northampton County authorities are refusing to comment on what they claim is still an ongoing investigation. Now wait a minute. This cave beast was suspended from her job 7 years ago, and they still haven't finished figuring out why? Man, that white privilege is something else, ain't it? Now, Sara Packer was also arrested for obstructing the investigation, but was again let go and released by police. It wasn't until Sara's remains were found out in the woods that the authorities finally decided that maybe they ought to hold on to her this time. Now, there's no word as yet on the criminal record of Jacob Sullivan, but he's a white thug, so what do you think? I was truly disgusted by this latest example of white criminality, though I was hardly surprised. And I, for one, have to wonder, when will it finally be okay to say that there's a sickness in the white community, a deeply rooted sickness, and this sickness has been protected and nurtured and encouraged by the dominant society? White people have a particular problem when it comes to the treatment of children, and it's at all levels. Doesn't matter if it's the Catholic Church pedophile scandal, or John Wayne Gacy, or white teachers who just can't keep their hands or genitals off of children. When it comes to the young, they don't look at them as their living legacy. They look at the children as being easy prey. And at some point, the white community needs to go ahead and be specific about this particular malady that seems almost exclusive to their community. Now, let's compare what happened to little Grace Parker to what didn't happen to Austin Hilborn. The white media lost their minds because of a mere hazing video among friends in Chicago. They even had the nerve to call that torture. But here you have a girl who actually was tortured, who was raped, beaten, drugged, and left to swelter to death in an attic. Then she was strangled. All for the sick amusement of two white degenerates. Now, where's the white media's outrage over that? Better yet, where are the front page stories? Where's the protesting by white citizens? How about the police? Why isn't this the lead story on the news? Not even once has it led the news. This unspeakable crime has been censored by the white media from the news cycle. Now that we've seen what a real torture crime is, I hope the people who made a big deal of the non-hate crime in Chicago feel appropriately embarrassed. By their silence, I can tell they do. Though I wouldn't put too much money on it because, after all, they don't have any shame. There has been a notable lack of outrage about the rape, torture, murder of Grace Packer. A lack of calls for accountability from the white community. No introspection. No looking at themselves and asking, how did this happen in our community and why did we allow this? A group who is routinely exempt from examination or criticism is allowed to remain so. And in this case, you can't even ask, where are the white fathers at? Because it was the white father who was the very one who raped and strangled this child to death. So, as I've always told you, when it comes to white criminality, neither income nor family stability nor social status has any impact on them. Doesn't matter if it's some trailer trash or a ridiculously wealthy elite family. Doesn't matter if they were orphans or came from a two-family home. White criminality remains consistent and sustained at all levels of their society across the board. Nothing changes it, nothing alters it. None of the white people who were faking outrage a week ago about the Chicago video was asking why this crime wasn't getting the same coverage and attention. No one was saying all lives matter either. That's because under white supremacy, no lives matter. Only white power matters. And under white supremacy, the highest power is to kill with impunity. That is the very principle white supremacy was created to protect. The right of white people to kill blacks because we pose a threat of genetic annihilation, and the right of white people to kill even one another merely as recreation. There is something deeply wrong and uniquely evil going on in the white community, and there is a war to make sure that this never gets discussed. Well, we are going to discuss it. We are going to expose it. We are going to continue to make white depravity an issue. Because when you have a group of people who rape, torture, and murder children merely for kicks, that is more than just perverted. But when you have a system that protects the Sara Packers of this world after they find out about her ex-husband's deviant behavior, a system that even to this day refuses to tell the public why she had to be suspended from her job 7 years ago, well, that goes beyond perversion. That is an abomination. That is white supremacy. Because if Sara Packer had been black, do you really think that she would only just now be getting arrested? They would have done it years ago when her ex was arrested. But white criminality is the sin that dare not speak its own name. And because the white media refuses to discuss it or always tries to rationalize it away, white people don't really think that they have a problem. They believe that this is always just a series of isolated incidents that happen everywhere in America that white people live every single day. To them, they're totally normal. So hey, if it ain't broke, why bother fixing it? Well, Grace Packer has become a victim of this white normalcy. Her indescribably hellish last 2 days alive stand testament to white culture. If white people were not immune to the law, then Sara Packer and the demon she was involved with would never have had the chance to get this child in their clutches. This satanic act was beyond sick. It was beyond depraved. But at the same time, it was typically white. These two animals looked at that child for years, knowing what they were going to do to her one day, waiting for it, savoring it. The same way Dylan Roof sat in the prayer room of Mother Emanuel Church and looked at the people who he was conspiring to murder. He sat with them, pretended to pray with them, all the while only caring about the typically white act of savagery that he planned to carry out. It makes sense under white supremacy that white people don't punish white criminals for attacking black people, but what reason do they have not to punish white offenders who attack other white people? It's because white people hate blacks more than they love their own lives. And until that changes, nothing else will. And so it won't be long at all before I have to report to you about yet another tragedy in the self-inflicted genocide of white-on-white crime.